Have you ever done something when you thought no one was watching, just for yourself, just for joy, and then realized that someone was watching the entire time? Not just anyone, but the most powerful person in the building? Today's story is not just about a janitor. It's about freedom, expression, judgment, power, and how sometimes the smallest moment can change someone's life forever. If you've ever felt invisible or underestimated, what happens next might just hit you in the heart. Let me tell you something right now. You're going to find out exactly what happened when a janitor danced like no one was watching, except the CEO was. I know you're wondering, did he get fired? Did he get humiliated? Or did something completely unexpected happen? Stick around till the end because not only will you get your answer, but you'll see how one moment of truth turned a quiet, overlooked employee into the center of attention. And possibly something much more. This isn't just a story. It's a reminder that your light can shine the brightest when you least expect it. I want you to picture this. Late at night, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. The office floors are silent, the cubicles empty, and the towering glass walls reflect the city lights like stars that never sleep. And in the middle of this sterile, corporate world, a janitor, a young man named Marcus, moves quietly with his mop and cart, humming under his breath. But something is different tonight. Maybe it was the song in his earbuds, or maybe it was just a burst of joy from deep inside him. Whatever it was, Marcus did something he hadn't done in a long time. He started to dance. Now, this isn't just some random dance. Marcus didn't just shuffle his feet or nod his head. No, he danced. He spun, glided, dipped, and popped with the kind of energy that could light up a stage. And here's where it gets real interesting. Because what Marcus didn't know was that just a few floors above, someone was watching. Not just security footage. Not just a nosy coworker. The CEO herself, Evelyn Sharp, a woman known for her cold precision and no-nonsense demeanor, had paused mid-call when the camera feed from the late-night cleaning crew flashed across her screen. And what she saw, it didn't make her angry. It made her curious. So why did Evelyn, a billionaire businesswoman with 100 meetings on her calendar and investors breathing down her neck, suddenly become so intrigued by a dancing janitor? That's what we're about to explore. But before we dive deeper, let me talk directly to you for a second. Yes, you, the one watching this right now. I want you to think about how many people in this world go completely unnoticed. How many Marcuses walk past us every day, unheard, unseen, dismissed. Maybe you felt like that. Maybe you still do. That's why this story matters. This isn't just entertainment. It's a mirror. And if you stick with me through the end of this video, not only will you understand why this moment changed everything for Marcus, but you might also see something in yourself you haven't noticed in a while. Because sometimes, the right person sees you at the wrong time, and everything changes. Let's rewind a little, shall we? Marcus wasn't always a janitor. In fact, 5 years ago, he was enrolled at a top dance academy in New York City. Full scholarship. Standing ovations. Standing at the edge of stardom. But life doesn't always go according to plan. A family emergency, a lost job, a dream shelved to take care of his younger sister after their mom passed away. And so he cleaned floors while others chased dreams. But he never stopped dancing. Not in his heart. Not when no one was looking. The company building he worked in? A high-end tech startup with billion-dollar investors, fancy espresso machines, and meetings full of buzzwords like scalability and synergy. And somewhere in the middle of all this sleek modern chaos was Marcus, mopping up spills, polishing elevators, picking up after people who didn't even notice him. But that night, he danced. And Evelyn? She watched in silence, her eyes narrowing, not with suspicion, but with something else. Something like recognition. Because what no one at the company knew was that Evelyn had once danced too. Before the boardrooms, before the Forbes features, before the walls she built to protect her from the pain of loss, she had danced. She knew the language of movement, and she hadn't heard it spoken in years. But don't get it twisted. Evelyn Sharp wasn't some fairy godmother CEO waiting to grant dreams. She was a powerhouse, sharp, shrewd, and skeptical of everything. So when she saw Marcus on the screen, moving with freedom in a place that was supposed to be buttoned up and silent, something inside her cracked. She didn't know what she'd do yet. All she knew was, she had to know who he was. So here's where things start to get tricky. Because the next morning, Marcus was called into the HR office. No explanation. Just, the CEO wants to speak with you. Now let me ask you something. How would you feel? You danced alone, thinking no one was watching, and the next thing you know, the head of the company wants a word.
Would your heart stop? Would you panic? That's exactly what Marcus felt. The fear of being exposed. The fear of being punished.
The fear of daring to express joy in a place that only seemed to value quiet obedience. And yet, there was something else.
A spark.
A question.
Why now? Why her? Why me?
Stick with me, because what happens next doesn't just reveal who Evelyn really is, but it also forces Marcus to confront something he's tried to bury for years.
This isn't a fairy tale.
It's not about luck or magic or suddenly being handed everything on a silver platter. It's about the choices we make when no one is watching, and what happens when someone finally does. Now I know you came here to find out what happened after the CEO saw him dance, and I promise, you're going to get your answer. But this story, like real life, isn't about rushing to the end. It's about the moments in between. The hidden truths. The unexpected turns. And trust me, by the time we reach the climax, you'll realize that the moment Evelyn walked into Marcus's life, she wasn't just watching him.
She was seeing herself.
But before we get there, before the confrontation, the revelation, and the choice that changed both their lives forever, there's one more thing you need to know. One detail that neither Marcus nor Evelyn were aware of at the time. A detail that, if known sooner, could have changed everything. Late that night, after Marcus had left and Evelyn had closed the camera feed, someone else had seen the footage too.
Someone who didn't see it as inspiring. Someone who saw it as a threat.
And that changes everything. When Marcus stepped into the HR office that morning, the air felt heavier than usual, like the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on him. The receptionist, usually too busy scrolling on her phone to notice the janitorial staff, gave him a long look, curious, maybe even suspicious. Inside the glass-walled conference room, he saw two people, a man in a fitted grey suit with sharp cheekbones and colder eyes, and Evelyn Sharp, the CEO herself, leaning back in her chair, arms folded like she was waiting to unravel something.
Marcus's heart pounded.
Every step toward the room felt like a lifetime. Was this about what happened last night? Was he in trouble?
He didn't think anyone even knew his name.
And yet, there he was, about to sit across from the most powerful person in the building.
His palms were sweaty. His mind raced.
All he could think about was that dance, that one moment of joy, and whether it had cost him everything. Evelyn's voice was calm but carried the weight of someone used to being listened to.
She didn't mention the dance at first.
She asked about his background, how long he'd been with the company, if he was happy working there. Marcus answered politely, unsure where any of this was going. Then came the moment she leaned forward, tapped a button on the small remote on the table, and a muted security video clip appeared on the screen. There he was, mopping, pausing, then dancing under the moonlit lobby lights.
The room was silent as the footage played. No one laughed. No one scolded.
The man in the suit just scribbled something in a notebook. Evelyn looked at Marcus and asked, "What were you feeling when you did that?"
It wasn't a trap. It didn't sound like she was mocking him. But it didn't feel safe either. It was the kind of question that digs past your skin and into your soul.
Marcus hesitated, then answered honestly. Free. What Marcus didn't know was that Evelyn hadn't called him in out of pure curiosity or admiration. She had her reasons, rooted in something more personal than she let on. The company's image was shifting. Investors wanted to see culture, creativity, authenticity. Evelyn knew this. But deep down, it was more than strategy. She saw something in Marcus's dance that reminded her of who she used to be before the spreadsheets, before the mergers, before life got so loud she couldn't hear herself think. She wasn't sure what she wanted from him yet, a campaign, a feature story, maybe just a reminder that humanity still existed in her world. But there was another layer to this meeting she hadn't accounted for. The man in the suit, Richard Connors, head of internal operations, saw things differently. Where Evelyn saw artistry and heart, he saw risk. A janitor caught dancing on the job wasn't a feel-good story to him. It was a liability. In his eyes, Marcus broke protocol, could be seen as unprofessional, might cause whispers that the company was becoming too soft. Connors had built his career on control, on keeping things within the lines.
He didn't like surprises.
And Marcus, with his mop and music and spontaneous joy, was a walking disruption. He didn't say it outright, but Marcus could feel the tension radiating off the man.
Something told him that this wasn't just about a dance anymore. Something deeper was moving beneath the surface.
After the meeting, Marcus was told to go home for the day.
Paid leave, they called it. Just a precaution. But it didn't feel like a reward. It felt like limbo.
He walked through the same polished hallways he cleaned every night, now in daylight, now with eyes on him.
Whispers. Side glances. Somehow, someone had already started spreading the word.
That's the thing about office buildings, they are glass castles full of secrets. And in a world addicted to trending topics and viral content, one leaked clip could flip the entire narrative.
And someone had already leaked it.
By that evening, a short video titled "Janitor Dances Like a Pro After Hours, CEO Responds" was trending on YouTube Shorts.
No one knew who posted it.
The angle was from a security feed, but it was edited just enough to feel slick.
The comments poured in.
This guy's got moves. Who is he? Bro's a better dancer than half of TikTok. That CEO better give him a raise.
Marcus saw it and froze.
He hadn't given anyone permission to film or post that.
His private moment had become public. Viral. Millions of views. But the face of the uploader? Hidden. Anonymous. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching the chaos unfold with a smirk.
Evelyn, upon discovering the leak, wasn't furious like Marcus expected. In fact, she was intrigued. The public's response was overwhelmingly positive. They weren't mocking the company, they were celebrating it. But that didn't mean everything was fine. Evelyn wasn't the only one calling the shots. The board had opinions. Investors had concerns. And Richard Connis was already drafting an internal report citing potential breaches in security, loss of brand control, and unmonitored behavior of non-core staff. Marcus was now at the center of a tug-of-war between vision and control, creativity and conformity, exposure and exploitation. Meanwhile, Marcus was dealing with another pressure no one else saw. His younger sister, Lila, had just gotten accepted into a private arts school. The tuition? Way out of reach. Marcus had been saving every dollar, working double shifts, skipping meals, all so she could have the chance he gave up. The dance wasn't just a random burst of energy, it was the only way he knew to keep hope alive in a life that had slowly drained the color out of him. And now, suddenly, the spotlight was on him, but he didn't know if it would burn him or light a path forward. And then came the message. An email with no subject line. No sender info. Just a short, simple line, "Be careful who's watching. Not everyone is cheering." Attached was a still frame of him dancing from an angle that hadn't been part of the security footage.
Someone else had been there. Someone else had filmed him. Someone with an agenda.
And that's when everything started to shift. Because this story isn't just about a janitor who danced. It's about what happens when your private truth becomes public property. It's about how power responds to authenticity, and how not everyone wants to see joy survive in a system built on silence.
But what Marcus doesn't know yet is that this was never just about him dancing. It was always about who wanted to stop him. And why.
The next morning came with a heaviness that Marcus hadn't felt in years. Overnight, the clip had crossed 10 million views. His face was on reaction channels, dance influencers were breaking down his moves frame by frame, and TikTok was already filled with people copying the janitor shuffle. There was even a trending hashtag, #dancing_janitor. At first glance, it all looked like a dream coming true, the kind of viral rise everyone fantasizes about. But beneath the surface, the chaos was building. Marcus hadn't given consent. He didn't even know who filmed it, let alone who leaked it. His phone, once silent, now buzzed non-stop with reporters, agents, brands, and strangers demanding interviews or offering collabs. And in the middle of all that noise was something far more personal. An envelope slipped under his apartment door with no return address, no name, just a typed note. "If you speak, you'll lose everything." At the company, things were boiling behind closed doors. Evelyn Sharp was facing pressure from the board, half of whom wanted to spin the situation into a PR win, the other half wanting to terminate Marcus quietly before the company became a joke. Evelyn pushed back, but Connis was gaining influence fast. He had data, policies, legal backing, and most importantly, fear. He called an emergency meeting, painting Marcus as a potential security breach, emphasizing how unauthorized footage had leaked from inside a high-security building. He questioned the integrity of the janitorial staff, even hinting that Marcus may have leaked the clip himself for clout. It didn't matter that Marcus didn't even have access to those security systems. In the world Connis thrived in, truth was negotiable. Perception was power. What made things worse was that Marcus started noticing someone following him, not openly, but there were signs. A black SUV parked across from his apartment building that didn't move for hours. A man in the company parking lot who never went inside but seemed to linger every time Marcus was near. And the same message, "Be careful who's watching," started popping up in random places. On a napkin left at his local coffee shop. On a sticky note taped to his locker. On his phone screen, flashing briefly before disappearing. He didn't know if he was being paranoid or targeted, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was pulling strings in the background. Meanwhile, Evelyn was fighting her own war. What no one knew was that 15 years earlier, she'd walked away from a scholarship to Gilead to take care of her mother during her final year of cancer. Dance had been her first love. It taught her freedom, grace, discipline, but life demanded something different. So she had built a fortress around herself with spreadsheets, deadlines, and boardroom armor. But Marcus's dance broke through a crack in that wall. It reminded her of what she buried deep. And now, watching the board tear into him like he was a threat instead of a human, she started questioning everything. Was this company still hers? Had it ever been? Desperate to find out the truth, Evelyn did something uncharacteristic. She went down to the security room herself, late at night. She asked for the original tapes from that evening. But when she watched them, something didn't sit right. The footage that had gone viral wasn't part of the official feed. The angles didn't match, the timestamps were off, and in one corner of the video, barely visible, was the outline of a person crouched behind a pillar, phone in hand. Someone had been filming Marcus in secret, without him knowing. It wasn't an accident. It was a setup. The twist hit hard. The anonymous uploader's IP address, when traced through internal systems, led back to someone inside the company. Not just anyone, but someone in Connor's department. Evelyn didn't have all the pieces yet, but she had enough to realize this wasn't about dancing. It was about leverage. Someone wanted to use Marcus, twist the narrative, and weaponize the backlash, either against her, against the brand, or both. And that someone wasn't working alone. Back in his apartment, Marcus sat with his sister, Lila, who had been watching the whole thing unfold with wide, confused eyes. She was proud of him, but scared too. Fame looked pretty on the outside, but she could see what it was doing to her brother. The stress. The surveillance. The fear. And then, just when Marcus thought things couldn't get weirder, he got a call. Not from Evelyn, not from the company, but from a high-profile dance reality show producer. They wanted him to audition. On air. Live. In front of millions. All expenses paid. They'd seen his moves and thought he was exactly what America needs right now. But the offer came with a deadline, 24 hours to decide, or it would go to someone else. Marcus was torn. This could be his ticket out, a way to restart his dream, fund Lila's tuition, and finally be seen for who he was. But walking into that spotlight meant stepping away from his job, possibly violating his contract, and most dangerously, it meant making himself a bigger target. He didn't know who was trying to silence him, but one thing was clear: they were willing to do anything to keep the truth buried. Evelyn tried to warn him, meeting him privately in the parking garage beneath the building. She told him what she found, what she suspected, and what might be coming. But even she didn't have control over all of it. There were people above her, investors, board members, silent partners, who were pulling strings she couldn't cut. She told Marcus to be careful, to trust no one. And then she handed him a small flash drive. "This might explain why they are scared of you," she said before disappearing into the dark. Later that night, Marcus plugged the drive into his laptop. It wasn't just about him dancing. It was about what the cameras also accidentally caught: a confidential meeting between Connors and an outside party. Illegal data sales. Breach of ethics. The video had been ignored, overwritten, until Marcus's dance accidentally recorded it in the background. That's why they wanted him gone. The dance was the distraction. The real danger was what his joy accidentally revealed. The stakes had shifted. It was no longer about a man dancing when he thought no one was watching. It was about a man who was watched because he unknowingly witnessed something he was never supposed to see. Now Marcus had to decide: stay silent and safe, or speak up and risk everything. And what he doesn't know yet is that someone very close to him has already made a choice for him. Marcus barely slept that night. The video on the flash drive kept replaying in his mind. It wasn't just a recording, it was a key that unlocked the real reason why his simple dance had caused such chaos. The footage clearly showed Richard Connors in a closed-door meeting with a known tech consultant notorious for illegal data mining and corporate espionage. In the background, just barely visible in the reflective elevator panels, was Marcus dancing, joyfully unaware of what his presence was capturing. The very moment that made him a viral internet sensation was the same moment that exposed a secret worth millions.
Marcus had stumbled into a battle he never signed up for.
And now, someone was trying to silence him not because of his talent, but because his dance had caught them red-handed.
He knew he couldn't keep this to himself.
The risk was enormous, but he couldn't walk around afraid anymore. He also couldn't let Connors destroy everything Evelyn had built, or continue to use the company as a front for something so rotten.
But even more than that, Marcus was done hiding.
For too long, he had kept his dreams folded up and tucked away, making himself smaller to survive.
That ended now. He called Evelyn and told her everything.
She wasn't surprised, but she was angry. Not at Marcus, but at herself for not acting sooner. She made one decision in that moment. If she was going down, she was taking the rot with her. The next day, the company held its annual shareholder live stream, a slick, highly produced event broadcast across YouTube, LinkedIn, and corporate media channels. It was meant to showcase growth, innovation, and vision for the future. Evelyn was scheduled to speak, and so was Connors. But just before the broadcast began, Marcus walked into the building with purpose in every step. Employees turned their heads.
Some clapped. Some whispered. Some watched in tense silence. He was no longer just a janitor.
He was a symbol of truth, of defiance, of possibility. As Connors approached the stage, Evelyn made her move. She interrupted the broadcast with a personal announcement. With the camera streaming live to over 200,000 viewers, she said, "Before we talk about projections and profits, I want to talk about something real. About courage. About integrity. About a man you probably know by now as the dancing janitor." The feed cut to the clip of Marcus's dance, now seen from a new angle, one that clearly showed Connors in the background, whispering with the outside party.
Evelyn let it play.
The silence in the room was deafening. Then she looked into the camera and added, "Sometimes, the people you overlook are the ones holding the truth you're too scared to face." Connors tried to speak, but Evelyn already had legal backing. She'd contacted outside counsel, and once the footage aired, regulators were watching too. Within hours, Connors was escorted out of the building. An internal investigation launched. Stock dipped briefly, then surged as public support poured in, praising Evelyn for her transparency and courage.
But the biggest applause wasn't for her. It was for Marcus.
Within days, Marcus was offered not only full reinstatement, but a creative director position on a new cultural initiative designed to build community and creativity within the company.
But he turned it down.
Not because he was bitter, but because something even bigger was waiting. The reality show producer had seen the live stream. They offered him a contract, not just to compete, but to choreograph a national tour. And more importantly, a scholarship for Lila was included, no strings attached. Before he left the company building for the last time, Marcus walked through the lobby where it all began. He stood in the same spot where he once danced alone, earbuds in, heart wide open.
Now, he wasn't alone.
Employees watched from the upper floors.
A few started clapping.
One even joined him, spinning playfully before breaking into a laugh. What once felt like a silent, sterile world now pulsed with something warmer.
Something real.
But just as the story seemed to settle, one final twist emerged. A week later, Evelyn received an anonymous package. Inside was a USB drive and a single photo of her, years ago, dancing in a small off-Broadway studio. The USB contained a short clip of that same moment. Someone had recorded her long before she became CEO. On the back of the photo, in faint handwriting, was a note, "Never forget who you were before they told you who to be."
Evelyn didn't recognize the handwriting. There was no return address.
But the message was clear. Someone had been watching her too, not to exploit her, but to remind her that even leaders need to remember their beginnings. The story of Marcus, the dancing janitor, wasn't just about one man's moment.
It became a movement, a reminder that joy is revolutionary.
That truth doesn't whisper, it dances. And that sometimes, the most powerful act of all is to move like no one's watching, especially when everyone is. So if you're watching this now and you've ever felt invisible, or silenced, or like your moment might never come, remember this: one small spark, one quiet joy, one dance in the dark can change everything. You just have to be brave enough to move.